is Mark's Musings, and I'm Mark. And today we are excited to have with us a guest by the name of Edward Rayner, who has written a couple of books. And I met him at an author fair up in North Andover at the Osgood Estate. It was very fortuitous because I met a lot of other authors at the same time, and we have become acquaintances. Good morning, Ed.
How you doing, Mark?
Yeah, very good. So we are off to a good start here. I have a couple of cameras going in the background, so I'm trying to tape this video-wise as well as do an audio show here for my podcast. Let's get started by saying, how did you get interested in writing this book that you have written?
This particular book grew out of my interest in ancestry.
Great.
The book is about the two characters. One is my great-great-granduncle, Henry Martin Tremlett. He's in the 20th Massachusetts Volunteer Regiment.
That's interesting, yes.
The other is also related to me. These are distant relatives, granted. The other relative is Francis William Tremlett. He's my first cousin, but he's like 4 times removed or something like that.
Oh boy.
But Henry and Francis were first cousins to each other, so they were like in the same generation. You want to? Okay.
Go ahead. Keep on going.
At any rate, they were on opposite sides of the Civil War. Henry, as I said, was an officer in the Union Army, and Francis, as I like to call him, Father Frank, he was an Anglican priest who, from London, started a church there and became the foremost collaborator with the Confederacy.
Oh my God!
Operating
Yes.
Spy Central.
That's interesting about the CIA today, and now we have go back a couple of hundred years. We had
They were always agents, as they called them, but they were spies.
Spy agencies, yes. So that was great, yeah. So, what happened next?
Between the two of them?
Yes.
Well, the book follows them through their lives. The most significant overlap is obviously during the war, but it covers all of them covers all of their lives, both of their lives, from start to finish. In the case of Henry, we have an officer in the Army that went through significant battles.
Wow.
And survived the entire war.
Now, how did you find that out? How did you find that information like that?
Well, the thing is whenever you write historical nonfiction, which is what this is, it involves a tremendous amount of research.
Wow, yes.
And some stuff is online, but you have to hoof it a lot to different locations. For me, a lot of the information came out of the Boston Public Library, the New England Historical Association. If you look at the back of the book, where all of the footnotes and and so forth, that kind of like gives you an idea of what the research entailed.
How receptive are the Historical Society to you, and how do you make contact with them?
It's easy to make contact, typically by email. In the case, for example, I'll use the example of the Boston Public Library. I first contacted. You had to find who you were looking for first, and that took me to the special books section of the library, right? And that's kind of an interesting place. It's kind of like a vault, and you can't take anything in, not even a pencil or a piece of paper or anything. They'll give you a pencil and paper,
My God,
but
yes.
they're concerned, I guess, about you, I don't know, defacing something
Sure,
or
sure.
something like that. But there's a lot of interesting things. That's where I found letters that were written by Henry
Oh, yes.
to his mother.
My God, to have firsthand information like that. Yeah.
And letters are like the gold standard. Historical nonfiction. I mean, there's nothing better to give you an idea about the individual, the person. And that's central when you're developing a book, is to make those characters come to life for the reader.
Now, how were you able to take a couple of pictures of what you saw at the libraries?
We were able to take, like, from those letters, I was able to get photocopies.
Oh, okay, yes.
And
then you took notes, like handwritten notes you had to...
Yep, handwritten notes, anything and everything. I mean,
So I'm just wondering how you recorded some of because it must be voluminous information, and how do you take it with you beside having it in your memory?
It's not so bad how you take it with you, it's more how do you find it. Because the method, I mean, everything isn't like, a nice simple little card system like you find in a library with, you look up a subject or an individual or something like that.
Yeah.
You really have to dig a lot.
Wow,
and it's just a question of...
So a typical day, for instance, you would go to the Boston Public Library, and you'd have a little notebook maybe or something, but you couldn't
take it in
there.
Right.
So you would
give you a piece of paper,
and you would go in, the person you want to look up,
Yep.
and they would help you find where that person was, or...
Yeah, but you need to know more than just the person's name. You need to, date of birth, date of death. In the case of Henry, the fact that he was in the 20th Massachusetts Regiment.
Yes. Yeah.
That was helpful because they have a lot of stuff.
So someone was there to assist you?
Yes.
Okay.
There's a couple of people that are in there.
Okay.
When you find something that you want them to bring to you, and that's what they do. It's not like you can go and get it.
Okay.
You have to fill out a slip of paper with the pertinent information.
Yes,
you hand
yes.
it to a person. They
okay.
go off, and then they come back, and lo and behold, here's the diary or the letters or what have you that.
So once you
look for.
find something, you could then have it photocopied.
You can have it photocopied, right? Or in if it's something that you can just jot down, all of the relevant information that you want to know.
Yeah.
That works too. Of course, anything that you use has to be, documented in the book.
Oh, yes. Where you got it.
To give the proper
citation.
Yeah.
That's very, very good. So once you got some of this, so you went to those libraries, you went to the historical societies, you probably called and sent letters to different relatives that you had?
Actually, yes, I did. I made phone calls when I started looking at the ancestry of these people. I found descendants that were still living in the United States. And that was an interesting experience by itself. In one case, unfortunately, the fellow had passed away just recently, and I got his wife on the phone.
Oh, yes.
And, I felt like a real bozo, but, because her husband had just died, and here I am asking for, a favor.
Information.
But she was very nice and everything. She handed it off to her son, and he sent me a bunch of information about the vicar. I bet that they were happy that some of their father's and husband's work was going to be carried on somewhere or shown somewhere else beside just lost in his library.
It was a mixed reception, to be sure, because they knew that I was from Massachusetts,
Yes.
and there's a prevailing thought among many folks about
the war books that if you're from the South and the person's writing a book from the North, that they don't want to read it. So where Father Frank was a supporter of the Confederacy, and I definitely got the feeling that, you know, they were former unreconstructed Confederates themselves. One guy was from California, another guy was from Maryland.
Yes.
They were both relatives, and the reception from the guy from Maryland was definitely very cool.
Interesting. Yes.
Maryland was a border state.
Yeah.
Maryland had slaves that
Yeah.
hadn't been abolished yet, like the rest of the North. So
Yes.
I think that that there was a little bit of an attitude about that, as well as like, who is this guy that's calling me out of the blue about somebody that, you know, died a couple hundred years ago that was my relative? And I said to him, I said, well, you know, we're probably all, you know, distant cousins of one another because we're from the
Sure.
same extended family tree. But his response to me was, he says, yeah, I suppose we are all relatives.
Oh, ease the tension a little bit.
He wasn't impressed.
Well, that was great. So you started to gather a lot of this information through different sources, and so you had some through the libraries, through the societies, through the people that you met and called, and so now what next? Did you start to put pieces together, and did you have a plan on what you wanted to do with all this information?
Well, the amount of research
Had to do was quite a bit.
Of course.
And it took a lot to organize that information. I know that when I'm writing, a lot of times that the beginning of a book or a project, we'll call it.
What happened?
I don't know. I think I'm caught here.
Oh.
Sorry about that. When you're putting all of that information together, it's sort of like similar to when I was working for a living. I was a software engineer, and a lot of projects start off by like a storyboard.
Oh, sure.
And you end up with, you know, back in those days we used Post-it notes. Okay, now we can use something electronic. But basically what I'm talking about is putting together a bunch of ideas. They may not all flow together immediately. And they typically don't, because as you get an idea, you're going to jot it down in this file that has all of these things that you want to, you know, construct into a book.
Well, eventually you find connections.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's sort of like, you know, well, this goes up here and that goes down there.
Yeah.
And usually from that, I write the first draft of it.
Okay. Good.
Or I try to.
Yes.
Okay. And that will typically reveal any gaps, especially, again, with historical nonfiction. That indicates that, well, I have to go back and do more research in this area.
Okay. Before you wrote the draft, did you have an outline of what you wanted to say?
Yeah, that's kind of what I meant by
right,
this
draft.
Storyboard. It was,
Oh,
it was
yes.
sort of like a file full of ideas.
And you say-
Okay, and then you take, when you get when you think you have all the ideas that you want to write about,
Yes.
then it's a question of putting them together and
In a logical sequence.
yeah, sort of like a skeleton.
Yes.
And from that comes the first draft.
Wow. Yes. Yeah. Well, that takes a lot of organization, and like you said, you got to put all these pieces of a puzzle together and try to make some sense out of it. So.
Yeah, the interest lies in that, for me, is that because it was ancestry based.
Yes.
I can't explain it to you, but there's something about writing about something about ancestry, for me,
Yes.
that was different from writing something else. It was not hard to be motivated to
get up every day and write.
Well, I think it's a personal connection. You feel like you're part of the family.
I feel emotional when I talk about these two individuals.
Sure.
Yes, I do.
Sure, I bet, because you're blood relatives.
Exactly.
You're attached there. Yeah, very nice. Yeah. So you started to write your drafts, and you edited them some more, trying to get all the words right, etc. Hopefully you gave it out to different people to sort of read it for you, or you.
I actually went to a professional editor
Oh, good.
that was really made up the bulk of the expense of creating the book.
Yes, yes.
After that, it was designing and having the cover made and all of the other nuts and bolts that go into building a book. And I published it on CreateSpace.
Now, how did you get in touch with the editor or the design person?
Well, I went out on the internet,
Okay, yeah.
and I didn't have anybody that could give me a reference.
Recommendation.
Yeah. So I went out and basically, gathered some information about them, looked up any referrals, that kind of thing, to try to make a decision. Different editors have different ways that they charge you.
Okay,
Most of the ones that I'm familiar with charge by the word.
okay.
Colonel Navicker is, I think, 33,000 words. So,
Oh, wow.
So that was pricey, and but I wanted a good editor. On a previous book that I had written, I had a different editor, and I thought that she was fantastic.
Mhm.
Okay, but when I approached her about doing historical nonfiction,
Yes.
she wanted to beg off because she was more of, certainly other genres than that.
Oh, good. Okay, so well, at least she was honest anyway, and
Yeah.
she wanted you to find somebody who was going to be more worthwhile, for you. That's great. That's great. So then the next thing is, beside doing the editing, where they helped you with grammar and word and style and things
Flow,
like that,
everything, yeah.
flow. Then the next thing is you had the design
Right.
of
Yeah.
the cover. So did you pick out your own pictures, or did you have an assortment to look at?
I actually had come up with a design on my own. I didn't know how to implement it into a book cover.
Yeah.
Certainly not at the time. But I knew exactly what I wanted it to look like. If you look at the book, all of this stuff, this is stock. This is stock. I had them add that. Okay,
Yes.
and
You could
On-
face the camera, so if you just show
Yep.
that look over there.
that's stock.
Stuff.
And then on the back is a reproduction of a painting called. It's a painting of the battle between the CSS Alabama and the USS Kearsarge,
Okay.
which factors into the book. There's an influencing factor in all of this as the
Now,
the
when
victim.
you use stock items like that,
Yes.
do you have to get copyright permission?
These
The
particular
stock items did not.
Oh, great.
However, the painting of the battle between the Kearsarge and the Alabama is a painting. I'm trying to remember the fellow's name. Ted. I can't get it now, but I had emailed the painter
Yes.
because I had found a different painting and I was going to use it, and I had to chase the painter. It turned out that the painting was in a museum,
Oh, okay.
but there was no information about copyright.
Okay. Yeah.
And I was going round and round with the person at the museum. I wanted to use it,
Sure.
and she said that I couldn't find anything.
Oh.
So I begged off because I didn't want copyright infringement or
Sure.
something like that.
Sure.
So I ended up finding this painting. However, in order to use it, I had to pay 200 English pounds.
Imagine.
The man's name was Ted Walker.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yes.
At any rate, I ended up paying for it. I was delighted with it. It's exactly what I was looking for.
How much is that in U.S. currency?
Oh, back then it was probably like 240,
Oh, my
something
God.
like that in U.S. dollars.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, that was another hit financially, but it was secondary to the editing cost, and this was exactly what I wanted. So I bit the bullet
Very nice.
and
I
decided.
noticed that it's also in your Goodreads page too.
Mm-hmm.
That painting of the ship, I believe, is either in Goodreads or it's in Amazon author page.
Mm-hmm.
One of those two places.
Ted was real nice. We struck up an email
Yeah.
relationship across the pond,
Yeah,
as it were,
Sure.
and I ended up sending him a free copy of the book when it was finished, and he sent me a nice print of this painting along with another one
Oh, nice.
that sits in my living room right now. It's beautiful.
Well, isn't that great that
Yeah.
you bonded a friendship? Yeah, between. the
Yeah,
two
he
things.
signed them and everything.
That's great.
Maybe when he dies, they'll be worth a lot of money.
You hope. You hope.
Well, that sounds great. There was quite a scenario here between gathering the information, making a draft, having an editor, then designing your front and back cover, meeting all these people that help you along the way. And also, there's a cost. We never think about that with writers. It's not just pennies. You do have to pay for certain information that you get, and eventually, though, you come up with a product that hopefully is worth people looking at, and hopefully people will buy it too. That it's worth. It has a value to it. So it's nice that you put all this effort into it, and it turned out so well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Tell me just a little bit more about the story itself. It's a historical accounting. It depicts some of your relatives, but is there a description of some of the battles?
Oh, absolutely.
in the book?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I cover every battle that Henry was in.
Oh, okay.
I don't digress from that because
Yes.
that would be a digression from the
Sure.
book.
Yeah.
And you'd be hard pressed to write a book with every single battle in the Civil
Oh,
War.
I bet. Yeah.
But some of them were famous battles, some of them were not.
So you would, as a reader, you'd not only learn about the family connections, but also you'd learn about some of the historical facts too. Some of the battles, the places that the people were at, etc. So it's
The thing that was really fascinating about Father Frank is that he operated. It was called Rebel's Roost.
oh yes, yes.
He had several safe houses, and as a result of that, he hid a lot of Confederate agents in London when they were operating,
Yes.
and many of them are very famous.
Oh my God.
Certainly. I mean, Jefferson Davis and his wife Varinia had visited him there.
Yes.
And there's a whole host of people in the book that you find out about that went in and out of St. Peter's, which was the name of the church.
There's all kinds of
spy codes or whatever that they were able to pass from one person to the next.
that.
Yeah, and
you probably-
secrets were found out all the time because as much as there were Confederate agents and a place to hide them, So the Union Secret Service was even larger,
Oh, yes.
having established ties with England since the end of the American Revolution.
Wow. Yes. So that sounds terrific.
I think that one of the other points to bring out about the book, besides the story of the two individuals, is I don't think that our history books talk too much about the role that England played in the American Civil War. Everybody thinks of the American Civil War as something that was just indigenous to the United States.
Yes.
And even Ken Burns, when he did his PBS thing about the Civil War, there was only one little reference in it outside of the United States, and you really had to know the history to get it. It's kind of ignored, and the principal purpose of the Confederate agents in London was the acquisition of warships, because there was no Confederate Navy.
Oh, yes.
So they had them built in England.
Oh, my God.
And
I never thought about that. Yes.
Nobody does. And it's really a fascinating part of the story.
Yes.
How the Confederacy arranged for the acquisition of these warships, how they entered into agreement with English shipbuilders,
My God.
and all at the same time. There were Union agents who were snooping around trying to, why are these ships being built here, and who are they for, and that kind of thing. And they kind of knew, but you needed proof,
That is an interesting fact. Boy, yes, I'm just happy to even learn that today. That's super. Now, is there anything else that you wanted to add to our discussion here before I ask you about where we get the book? Or
No, I think that
you covered.
I don't think I have anything.
Yeah, we covered quite a lot of information here, and I'm so happy to have the opportunity to talk with you. And but if someone would buy your book and they wanted to get in touch with you, how could they do that?
They could email me directly.
I would not mind.
Okay. And what
My email, I have a new email.
Oh, great. Good.
It's Kelso4772 at Comcast.net. So it's Kelso, Kelso. That's our cat.
Okay.
Kelso4772 at Comcast.net.
Okay, great. 4772
Yep.
at Comcast.net. That's super. Now, that would be the email. Now, do you have a Facebook page also?
I have a Facebook page. If you went to, Edward Rayner, there's probably a link there
Okay.
to that page. I also have a WordPress blog
Okay.
called The Colonel and the Vicar. So if you were to go to WordPress.com and look for my name, and they give you the opportunity to browse around and everything.
Okay.
That would get you there.
So those-
But email is probably the best.
Okay. The other thing is we could buy it on Amazon.com.
That's true.
It's under your name,
Mm-hmm.
Ed Rayner. And does it come in different versions?
Yeah, you can buy it as a paperback, or you can buy it as an e-book, a Kindle book.
Yes, very, very good. I'm trying to think of anything else here before we come to a close here.
But this has been an excellent discussion with you. I'm so happy to have met you and then also have you here at this
Broadcast. I think we have come to the close of the podcast. If our listeners, again, this is Mark's Musings, and you can get us on wctv.org/podcast, and we're so happy to have Ed
here and had the opportunity to talk to him today.
Well, thanks for having me, Mark.
Oh, I'm glad that you enjoyed it, and
you're always interesting to talk to anyway, so I'm even off the air. you always have tidbits of information that is very interesting.
So thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the end, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye now.